Hey folks, welcome to Bear Mountain today. As you can see, I have my dibble stick. I've got 2 trays of Biennial Sweet William, and I got a bucket of dirt. What are we gonna do today?
We're planting in that bucket?
Stay tuned and find out. Okay, it's a beautiful day today in the fall in Western Oregon, and today we're going to plant our Biennial Sweet William Dianthus, and these guys typically bloom for us next May. So we started these guys back in early August, so we probably could have put them in the ground a week or so ago, but we kind of got behind on things. But they're still okay. They'll green up fast, and we got a good another month of growing here before winter sets in. So one of the things we're going to do here to kind of give these guys a jump start is we're going to give them an inoculant before we put them in the ground. Now, one of the things you may notice is that we're not using soil blocks, and that we're using 6-pack trays, and you can kind of see the roots are through there. And the reason we've done that is because first of all, where we're at, we ended up basically with soil blocks. If we tried to do some kind of pre-soak or inoculant to them, we were ending up getting a problem with the blocks dissolving. But secondly, from our standpoint, it was just a time factor. So we moved away from things that we do in the flower business for using the big soil blocks. We still use the minis extensively. Matter of fact, that's how these guys were started.
Those were started in mini
because
blocks.
they work out real well in the system. But for potting on, we typically now just use 6-packs. And the nice thing about it is you can mix and match in a tray. So like if you have only so many 6-packs of one variety and 6-packs of another, it's not that big a deal to kind of mix and match them up in a tray. It makes it easy. And it just saved a lot of time. So that issue aside, so what do we do next when we get ready to plant? We are using an inoculum of it's a biologically active soil that we removed right under the interface when you have a long-term compost pile, meaning something that's been there for 3 or 4 months. If you dig underneath that compost pile, what you'll find is the top inch of soil at that interface between where the compost pile ends and the soil it's sitting on is very biologically active. As a matter of fact, it's almost like cake sponge. And if you take that out, you can use that to inoculate teas that are, or in our case, what we're going to be doing is inoculating a tub of water with a handful of this soil, which is just perfect. I've looked tested under the microscope, and there's tons of biology in it. There's a few grass seeds that have sprouted, but that's not a big deal because we're not going to be adding this in as a compost to the soil. What we're going to be doing is taking a handful of the material and putting it in this tub here and just mixing it into the water itself. And what we're doing is we're taking tons of the stuff that's in here. There's fungal spores in here. It's like if you look at this little piece of semi-digested wood, besides taking that grass out of it, you can see that there's quite a few hyphae on there. So there's quite a few fungal spores in here, and there's a lot of actinomycetes, and there's all kinds of biology in here. Biology that will help these plants develop a strong root system. So the easy thing we do here is we'll take the tray, our first tray, and the nice thing again about these 6-packs is they're open at the bottom, and so when you look at the bottom, you can see there's slits in it. This is an open bottom tray. I can't really show you that without flipping everything out, but it's got wide open things in it. So we'll just set the entire tray into this tray of solution and give it about probably like a 5-minute soak. Once we see like at the top of the block that you can kind of see that the moisture is absorbed in there, we know that the plants itself have been given, a pretty good drink of the material, and then they'll be ready to plant. So let's walk over to the bed and we'll talk about how we're going to plant these guys. Okay, this is a dibble stick. We've probably talked about this before in other videos, so I'm not going to dwell on it too much. But the one thing that's important about this is this actually works very well with the 6-packs. And you may wonder why. Well, because the tip of this is the exact width of the cell in a 6-pack. So the beauty of this is when we dibble our marks in the bed, and then we'll come along behind, we very quickly can fill them without any extra effort or any extra digging from the 6-packs itself. So it really speeds up the process. So, you know, going back to why did we switch to the 6-packs, this was another reason, because to plant a 2-inch block, we found it very difficult. The only thing that came reasonably close was a Potapuki that was their largest one they had. And it worked, but it really disturbed a lot of the soil, more so than just, you know, being able to stick something in very briefly and kind of just give it a little twirl, and then you could put the plant in itself.
You also use it to save your back and knees.
Yeah, actually, because I don't have to lean over too much, except the point in time when we put the actual plant in itself, but that goes very fast. So we're going to plant this bed. This bed is approximately 4 feet wide by about 12 feet. So what we'll be able to get in here is kind of an alternating pattern. So every 12 inches we'll put a row of 5, and then in between those we'll put a row of 4. So we'll be able to get 60 plus 44, so let's say 104 plants in this bed itself. So not quite 2 complete 72 trays, but it'll make a pretty good dent in it. And now we'll plant pretty close to the edge of this. So when these plants grow, they're going to grow over and kind of shade out the edge a little bit. This has got a nice layer of compost on top. This is a urban waste compost, and there's about 3/4 of an inch or so on top, and the sides have about the same amount on it. So as this material ages in place, it really becomes locked in pretty good, and actually even in heavy rains, once it's kind of settled in place, we've noticed that it doesn't really move too much. So let me show you how we're going to do our holes. Okay, it's really a simple process. You just kind of stick the dibble stick in, give it a twirl, and what we're going to end up with, I'm not measuring these out perfect, so we might be off a few inches here or there, but the basics of it is that we're about even equidistant apart across the bed itself. Now, what you may notice here is this is a drip system in which there's about 8 inches between each emitter. So what I'm going to be doing is kind of going like 1.5, so to speak, which gets me pretty close to 12, and then do another row. And what I'll try to do is keep it even. Now I'm going to go through and do the whole bed, because the idea, let me make that a little bigger there, is that we'll get it all laid out, and then we can just come through and plant. And then in between them, I just do another one.
These can grow that close.
Yes. Now the reason why you may notice is like, okay, first of all, what about weeds? Okay, with the top deep mulch compost system, you typically have much fewer weeds. Over time, it gets very, very low. And it's easy to just do a walkthrough, even on a long bed, and pretty quickly either with a collinear hoe or by hand, and just pull out what you see. The second thing is you say, well, why isn't there any like landscape fabric or a plastic or something like that for weed control if you really felt necessary to do that? We don't do that on this farm. Now this bed is a small small example, but even on our large beds, we do not use landscape fabric. We use two things that basically control most of the weeds. The first is deep compost, and the second is intense planting. Now, intense planting will do a couple of things. You're going to end up with a canopy on these plants that are basically going to outcompete light for weeds. So once these guys get rolling on the size, they're going to basically coat this entire bed, and there'll be very, very few weeds. Now, this type of plant, Dianthus, can actually grow together pretty close anyway. So if you had other plants that were larger, as an example, maybe you'll make the spacing of the row of 5, instead of being 12-inch apart, maybe you go 1.5 feet and still do the one in between. But the whole idea is whatever you plant, you're trying to get down to the point where you're creating a canopy to outcompete the weeds.
It actually makes a better stem for these Sweet William. They get a tougher, larger, less fragile stem. Then the heads grow a little bit bigger, we find, with the intense competition.
Yeah, and also it one of the things, if you do need to use a net or something like that, sometimes what we found is just by having these plants on a more intense basis,
We don't net.
we don't need to net as much, because they're kind of supporting each other in some degree. Now, you can go overboard and put things way too close, and it is definitely going to negatively impact stem length,
Right.
stem strength, and the number of stems, period. So
But
there's
this-
kind of a fine line.
But this spacing has worked really well for us in the past with the winter Dianthus.
Right. So what we're looking at is spacing within the row is somewhere around 9 to 10 inches. And then inter-row is maybe 6 to 7 inches. And then between the major, the more numbered rows, if you want to call it that, we're looking at 1 foot to maybe a little more. And that seems to work well. I used to, when I started out, going, oh, I got to measure this out. Well, that was one of the advantages of having burned holes in in a landscape fabric. It was all done, so you didn't need to measure it out. Or you need a row dibbler or something like that. You run through and you got it marked out just perfect. And I guess what I found is it didn't really matter a whole lot. I suppose maybe if you're looking at it from a resource standpoint, saying, I know that I've got exactly this number of plants and I'm exactly this spacing out, that you're perfect. But I found that there's no real economic incentive to be anal
Nature
about this.
doesn't really measure stuff out. It just grows where it grows.
Yeah, she just kind of drops seed and goes, hey, have a good one.
Yeah.
Not
So
quite that bad. But.
we let go of that, precision part on it, and just found that if you're just close enough,
Yep.
it seems to work well.
What we want to do is we want to make sure that the plants have enough room, have a strong root system when they get started, and access to enough water to enable them to grow to their potential. So I'll get this done, and then we'll show you how we're going to lay the plants out. Okay, this variety is called Super Duplex, and it's got a nice, I think this is the one that's got a double ring color in it. I'm not sure.
No, I'm not
It's
sure.
definitely
I
got
think
big
it's a really good tall one with lots of color variety.
Right. We took the tray out of the mix. Now, these guys, like I said, have been in these 6-packs probably longer than they should have been. So we've got some definite.
Well, the roots are out. That's always good.
Yeah, but they're pretty. They're really packed in there. Anyway, what we'll do is we'll just stick it in, and then just kind of work a little soil around it, just like that. So you may notice I'm not on my knees, but I am a little bent over. But it's not too bad. I think this bed was a little longer than 12 feet because I ended up with 16 rows of 5 instead of 12 like I thought.
So on the question of the little plug trays, You can get those out with a little massaging, and they really would slip out if they weren't a little
Yeah,
too
because
root
what I got to
bound.
do is I got to pull the extra roots out that have come through the bottom.
But we're not destroying it.
No, it's
So,
not.
so we can use these plug trays for many more seasons.
Right. You want to get the ones if you got them from like a nursery, say like you were saving ones that you bought for bedding, you bought bedding plants, they'll actually be a much thinner plastic and they'll most likely will break. These guys were purchased from a nursery supply company here in Western Oregon, and it's just a little thicker plastic, and they seem to
If we don't step on them.
don't step on them or do other dumb things like I sometimes have a tendency to do. They last probably 3 or 4 seasons so
Which
far.
is
This
good.
is like the second season, I think, on these guys.
Second or third.
Second for sure.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they're not slipping out because these guys were in there too long. But now you'll notice when I'm planting, what I'm doing is I'm stuffing them right in the hole, and then I'm taking extra around. So I'm making sure that the actual base of the block is really in there good. So it's not sitting on top of the soil. I want these guys to have.
Those roots
Good
are
contact.
going to the soil that's beneath the mulch.
That's right. They're
They're
touching
not
the
being
soil.
planted just directly into the mulch.
If you plant just directly into the mulch with no soil contact, this type of compost is a great mulch, but its nutrient level isn't that great. It helps over time with nutrients because it's got a lot of woody material in it. But just to plant in it to say, I need a nutrient mix, this would not be the type of thing you would use for that, or even for like a potting mix, because it's just, it really lacks.
Doesn't it also during the summer dry out incredibly
It
fast?
does if it's brand new. If
Right.
it's aged through the winter, what I've found is the urban compost loses that, I don't know what you call it. I guess it's called a hydrophobic, meaning that it just repels water, and can, if it's brand new and hasn't aged out, what you'll find is you can wet down the top and then you just scrape off like a 1/4 inch, and it's bone dry under it, and you go, well, where'd all the water go?
Right. But so you pre-watered this.
Yeah.
You've been watering it over and over after you laid the mulch down.
Right.
Just making sure it's nice and moist.
Right. And the soil underneath was okay. It wasn't super moist, but and then once we get these guys in, then we'll give them another good watering.
And we're also going to have showers in another couple of days.
Yeah.
That'll just make sure that they're nice and watered in.
Okay, we got them all planted in, and we watered them in. And some people may ask, like, okay, we have the solution where we did the pre-soak to it, and so what do you do with it when it's left over? Well, I mean, you could just put it on the bed or put it around other plants or whatever it is. It's all good stuff to help puddle in the plants. You could do that again. So we know that what we've done in the pre-soak, if we've got the roots exposed to the biology that was in that soil underneath that compost pile. So in essence, it's almost like you soaked it in a form of a compost tea, which hopefully will inoculate the roots with all kinds of good things. And these guys should really take to this bed pretty quick. So then we watered them in. Just typically you can use a hose, whatever, to get them a good soak. And these guys should be okay for a while. The only thing extra we're probably going to do for this for just a few days is we may put like a light Agribon fleece over it, and that more than anything else is just kind of like to help ease through any kind of transplant shock. Wouldn't leave it on there that long, just long enough to make certain that the plants didn't have any kind of problems like with hot sun or something like that. And this particular time of year, the sun isn't at that high of an angle, so it's maybe not that big of a deal. And we also don't want any kind of birds coming along and pulling the plants out. We had that kind of happen on some things where we come back and we find the plant and plug laying on top of the ground. Not sure exactly why that is, but sometimes until the plant gets started, that can kind of be a risk. But mostly at this point, there isn't a whole lot more to do. These guys will grow on for a month and they'll take off again in the spring and we'll get some blooms.
They're pretty hardy, but if we have an unusually cold winter, we'll just put our hoop system over the top of them for a little protection. We've done that in the past, but it's not an every year type of thing. Last year they just did fine with no protection.
Yeah, usually in the spring, the only thing, there is an advantage to the hoops and putting some plastic protection over the top, but it's not for heat. It's more for like protecting the blooms from getting pounded by hail. Sometimes that time of year in this valley here in the Willamette Valley of Oregon, we'll get these afternoon just thunderstorms. They're not anything like people get in the Midwest, where you get baseball-sized hail, but if you're trying to market some blooms and getting smacked down by hail of any size is not a good thing. So if it looks like we're going to kind of have that kind of spring, we might do something with that. But other than that, yeah, you're right. I mean, extreme freezing could take them out, but usually not. I mean, these guys need cold weather to vernalize, so that's kind of what we hope is we do get some nice frosty days that these guys they'll look like somebody beat them with a baseball bat, but they're actually responding pretty well to
It's the days and weeks of sub-zero.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be sub-zero, but
anything frosty.
It needs a good 6 weeks of 40 degrees or lower.
Yeah.
And that'll do it. That'll set them to bloom. Because these are the true biennial types. So
yeah, these are the Sweet William biennial.
Right.
They're not first years.
Right. So if we want to get them to bloom, that's why started the seed in August, get them in the ground now. They get a month of growing behind them, and they'll just kind of go dormant.
They should have been probably planted in the end of September.
Yeah, I think we're about 10 days late.
10 days late.
But they'll still be okay. So anyway, thank you guys for watching today. I hope you picked a few tidbits out of this, and we'll see how this bed looks like coming through the wintertime. Maybe we'll do a follow-up, I'm sure, in May when it's blooming.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you guys all have a good day, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.